All right, what's up, everyone? My name's Limarc. I'm an editor here at HackerNoon. Today, we're going to be talking about the state of virtual reality in 2020. And we have some cool guests coming on today. We have two guys all the way from Tel Aviv, Israel, and they are with a VR video game developer called One Hamsa. Let's bring them on. Hey, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
How's it going? So thanks for joining me here today. If you don't mind, if you could please just briefly introduce yourselves and your positions and the kind of work you do with our readers.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Assaf. I'm the studio director for One Hamsa. I'm responsible for mostly the business aspect of things at the studio. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool.
And I'm Dave. I'm the creative director for the studio. Also responsible for most things art related.
Cool. So I found One Hamsa quite in an unorthodox fashion. I actually found one of your smaller releases on the side quest that isn't an official release on the Oculus store yet. So I have a few questions about One Hamsa in general. Firstly, what does One Hamsa mean?
I'll go the easy route.
Yeah.
All right. So Hamsa is a symbol you might have seen in Middle Eastern cultures, like the hand of Fatma. It's a symbol of basically good omens or good fortune. Yeah. And we hold that symbol quite dearly. It feels like home to us. I'm not sure how deep I want to get into the story, but basically we call ourselves One Hamsa, which is kind of 1-5 when there were 3 of us. And eventually it became 5 of us, kind of separately. These as in one of these events where the stars suddenly align in a weird way, and you're like, what? How did that happen?
Yeah.
So yeah, we ended up being One Hamsa. We were 5 partners, and that's the story.
That actually perfectly leads into my next question. So you're quite a small team so far. You have one official release on the Oculus Quest store so far. How did your company come into being? What's your founding story?
So all of us know each other for a long time before we opened the company. I met Assaf and another one of our partners in a game jam about 10 or 11 years ago. Another one of our partners has been a friend of mine since first grade.
Yeah.
We lived together for a while. We worked together for like 6 years. So we know each other for a long time. And basically with Assaf and our other partner, Boof, who we met 10 years ago in a game jam, we decided right after the game jam, all right, we're friends and we need to make games together. We started doing it on our own accord. And so basically since then, we've been kind of doing our own stuff here and there. And suddenly we got, like in 2015, 2 business opportunities that allowed us to actually open a studio officially. Yeah. And Racket NX was what would end up being one of those initial business opportunities.
Nice. So you haven't found that working with your friends has driven you apart? You haven't been pulling each other's hair out yet? It's all going okay?
On the contrary, it's it's fantastic.
Beautiful.
Yeah. We're like a multi-limbed creature. Right?
Yeah.
You're like one hand, right? It's each finger of the hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the middle finger.
So when I talk to a lot of VR devs and companies that are creating accessories for VR, one question that always comes to my mind is why you decided to go into VR. Because the video game industry is so huge. There's a lot of other genres and platforms that have much larger player bases. You can get many more sales. So what was the reasoning behind entering a very niche field? It seems like you're putting yourself in a handicap right away versus starting with like, a regular game on the PC or a more traditional console. What was your decision behind that?
It wasn't strictly decision as much as it was like a consequence. As Dave said before, one of the business opportunities that presented themselves in 2015 was a VR game. The other one actually was a traditional mobile game.
Okay.
but as we developed both projects and pushed them along, we I don't know if to say discovered or realized that the VR one has much more potential. I think the design aspects of it, it has more potential to be a success.
Interesting.
So,
I would say that in that respect, it's actually, I see it as the opposite of a handicap. If I go into the pancake gaming industry, as it's called in the VR industry, flat screens, as a new studio with no track record, I'm actually in a handicap. And in VR, especially when you're starting in 2016, you're in the same starting line as everyone else. And for us, we have a team that's, I think, very technically strong as well. And in areas like this, where you're really dealing with a new technology and trying to see what you can do with it, having the technical expertise that I'm very lucky to have a team that actually has, I think is a really strong suit that wouldn't be as leveraged in PC.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very interesting.
So combination of both consequences and then like a realized business decision that it just might be the right path for us.
And one additional thing that we kind of forgot because we've been in it for so long, but you know, all of us are sci-fi fans. We've been reading and imagining AR and virtual realities since we were kids. And the opportunity to kind of be a part of the forefront of content for these platforms has been very appealing to us. And in hindsight, I can also say that just seeing this technology, being so close to this technology as it develops and seeing how like different companies start appearing and disappearing, and each tech comes in and kind of either grows or dissipates, and you know, all the content that's trying to be created for that tech, just watching that happen has been absolutely fascinating. Once in a lifetime experience, I think.
Yeah. I feel the same way, you know, when a lot of people ask me if VR is worth investing in right now, it's kind of a hard question because it's definitely in its infancy. But the way that I describe it to people, it's kind of like, I heard somebody else on a podcast say it's kind of like being at Disneyland as Disneyland is being built. So you get to see, from the ground up how that world evolves, right? So it's quite cool.
Yeah, you have to be patient. You know, you have to have like a 5-year roadmap.
Wow.
Not just, you know, look at the year ahead. Try to imagine, and I think that the amount and level of opportunities that we've been having up until now wouldn't have happened for Pancake. For sure.
I see.
Sure. So it's like being in Disneyland while it's being built, but you also get to build some of the rides.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Very cool. So I want to go into one of your games first, and then we can go back to talking about the industry as a whole. Racket NX is the big game that you have on your advertised on your website. Presumably it's the game where you've gotten the most sales. And, you know, one of the things we talked about over email, Dave, was many people say the biggest problem with the VR is how a lot of things feel like a tech demo. And some customers feel like, you know, they're expecting a full AAA 30-hour game and they get something that feels really basic. But an interesting thing is Racket NX, in general, it's the concept of the game is quite basic, but you guys have done quite well in terms of gameplay mechanics, polishing it, and you've done really well on the Oculus Store. Could you tell me a little bit about porting it over to the Oculus Store and what that experience was like for you?
Well, I don't think the porting process itself was super interesting. Just going over the scripts, going over a render doc and just seeing what costs what and trying to, you know, shave everything we possibly can off. We're very happy with the final result in terms of performance. You know, we're on a steady 72 frames per second with a Snapdragon 835. That's also performing SLAM at the same time from 5 cameras. So and actually we just merged our PC and our Quest versions, taking the Quest assets to the PC And the Quest quality, like visual fidelity, is so close to the PC fidelity that we actually, I mean, obviously we told our PC players that this is happening, but we didn't hear any complaint about it whatsoever because the differences are so small.
Yes.
So on the other hand, Racket is a pretty simple, graphically simple game. I mean, the shaders are quite complicated, but in terms of geometry, in terms of lighting, these things that can really cost a lot, it's pretty simple. So that wasn't too difficult.
The reason I asked the question is because a lot of developers on SideQuest or even bigger developers, they mention that it's quite hard to get on the Oculus store, especially the Quest store. But for you guys, that wasn't that much of an issue?
Yeah, we were actually handpicked. We were curated by the Oculus team.
Really? Nice.
Yeah. We had Racket at the time. Was it on early access? No, I think it was already released on Steam.
Yeah.
And on Rift, on the Oculus Rift, and honestly, it didn't sell that well for the Oculus Rift, but still, they came to us with an offer. They gave us the dev kits, and they told us that they're developing this new headset that they think Racket would fit perfectly to. And
they asked if we want one.
And to which I answered, no, we need two of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Two of those because it's a multiplayer game. I had my reasoning.
But I think also one of the first points you made was about the game being simple but polished.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that, like, there's a lot of interesting concepts going around on SideQuest and in general in VR. I see, like, if you follow any of the VR channels on Reddit, usually the thing that get the most upvotes is like, oh look, I can make a gun that shoots alligators out of my finger. You know, stuff that's just like it's kind of a tech demo and it gets like 3,000 upvotes and everyone is super enthusiastic about it, but it doesn't actually go anywhere. It seems like there's a lot of interesting mechanics in VR, but there's very little polish, and also, maybe more importantly, there's very little games. I mean, even the more successful downloads, very few of them are actual games, things that you can evolve in, things that have a long-term goal, things that have a complex arrangement of game loops that you can engage in. I think maybe not to badmouth it or anything like that. If you take Sword and Sorcery, Blade and Sorcery, I forget, Sword and Sorcery, I think, right?
Blade and Sorcery.
Sorry, because I get it mixed with the original.
It's all good.
It's basically, let's call it a game. You know, it's more of a sandbox, right? You have melee weapons and these ragdoll / IK enemies, and you just kind of do stuff with it.
Yeah, a very successful sandbox.
It's very successful. The mechanics are good. They also really took the melee mechanics forward in VR. And I can't help but look at these things and say, if there was only a game around this thing, I would really enjoy it for hours. And I mean, people do enjoy it for hours. For me, it's not that engaging. I need story. I need context. I need a certain level of polish to get immersed also in these things.
Yes,
so,
for sure.
So it feels to me like a lot of what we're still seeing in VR is kind of in that realm right now. Still.
Yes, for sure. And when I said Racket NX has simple gameplay, it's not as simple as people would think. For the viewers here that don't know, I would describe it as tennis meets futuristic racquetball meets breakout. Well, would that be accurate?
Yeah.
And I think the Oculus team did a great job in recommending it for Quest, because the great thing about the Quest is the wireless nature, right? The ability to turn around in 360, and that's exactly what you need to do in this game. And I feel like when the games that have, you know, big followings, kind of grand visions, those are the games that kind of perform less well graphically on the Quest. But these games with simpler gameplay like yours, I have to tell you, I just tried it 2 hours before this phone call, and it's definitely one of the crispest graphics I've ever seen on the Quest so far.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the things that we try to do consciously is really fit the content to the platform. And that means in these respects, and this has been true for Racket NX since day one, is kind of trying to recognize the strengths of the platform and the weaknesses, playing to the strengths and not ignoring the weaknesses, but rather, just accepting them. So in Racket, for example, there's no locomotion, right? Because especially with the cable and stuff, that was a big problem. On the other hand, the physics are super, super tight because the tracking is so good on all of the VR devices that you can really get to a high fidelity there. And I think the same goes in terms of the visual graphics for Quest. I mean, it's just
for sure.
It's easy to put this kind of graphic to this kind of platform.
For sure, for sure. So if you guys don't mind, I have a little interactive activity for us planned. What I want to do is share my screen and hop on the Oculus Quest store real quick and have you read some of these reviews live and either refute them or, thank the viewer for rating you so high. But I'll make sure not to choose any incredibly spicy ones or ones with profanity. Is that cool with you guys? Okay, let's see. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yeah.
All right. So just for the viewers that don't know, this is Racket NX on the Oculus Quest store. And amazingly, you guys have 1,083 ratings so far. So presumably your sales have been quite good as well. So let's go ahead and let's start nice. Let's start with the 5-star ones. And this one was quite recent, about a month ago. This person says, great surprise. They weren't expecting much from this game. And to be honest, when you see the trailer and when you see people playing this game on YouTube, you don't expect much. It seems like some weird futuristic tennis game, but you really can't, as is the case with most VR, you can't really feel it until you're in there, Even if the YouTuber has the best quality recording, you can't really tell how the game is until you're in the game. So looks like this one is a good review for you guys.
For sure. But I think this point has been like the game's main point of contention since day one. With Racket NX, I think more so than other VR games, we've had a very problematic top of the funnel, as they call it. Once people get into the game, as you can see by the reviews are very high, but it's a little difficult to understand what the game is and how fun or rewarding it is to play it. We've tried improving it over time, but at the end of the day, there are premises that work better than others.
For sure.
Problematic on that respect.
Okay, let's do one more nice one. Sorry?
The word surprise appearing in many of the reviews.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I didn't expect anything, but then I went in and oh my god, it's my favorite game for VR right now.
Yeah, so this would be a typical 5-star review for us.
Yeah.
Like, this is actually nice.
Yeah. Well, I'll mark that one as helpful then. So again, this is a similar one. This guy says he bought this game on a whim because it is cheaper than the other sporty games on the Quest. There's quite a few expensive sporty game on the Quest so far. He describes it as a gameplay reminiscent of a futuristic combination of squash and pinball and perhaps a bit of Quidditch. So a little Harry Potter in there.
Oh, is that the thing with the brooms?
Yes, that's the flying game in Harry Potter.
I'll take it.
Yeah. He did have one thing here. Getting in your way is your decreasing health bar, which can be replenished by hitting blue health hexagons. Eventually, the health hexagons become fewer and further between, meaning a game over will always be inevitable. So this brings up a gameplay aspect that I wanted to ask you about, because who thought of the idea of health bars? A health bar in a sports game, it's almost unheard of. Is this sort of something where you guys started with a basic concept and then more and more team members just kept adding on gameplay ideas and you just rolled with it? Or how did that come along?
So actually, I think this is a very interesting question. And I think it might also, the answer might be interesting for game designers and VR enthusiasts in general, because we had a very interesting thing happen with that health bar. Initially, way early in 2016, in the early access days of Racket NX, what we had is the same concept in terms of a timer, that kind of pushed you to do things and kind of had this thing closing in on you, right? And the way we communicated it was that the entire floor around you, right, had this red circle that was slowly closing in, all right? So you had this red on the floor slowly closing in, and when it got to you, to your base, it was game over,
Okay.
all right? Now, we thought that this would be a very high affordance way of communicating this element, right? You basically have a floor is lava kind of situation where more and more of the floor gets red. You see it in your peripheral vision, right? And you can just feel the pressure of like, shit, everything is red. Players,
we're so sure of it.
Yeah, players didn't catch on. They didn't realize that the floor was really changing.
I see.
So we pushed it further. We kind of we had it progress in ticks, right? We had a little timer on it, like actual numbers, like in 4 places around the arena on the edge of the terminal, on the terminal of the red circle. We ended up even having this thing where when you hit targets that were green at the time, little pluses would come out of them, go into the floor, paint it green for a little bit, and push it back.
Okay.
And players still didn't catch on to it.
Interesting.
And at some point you're like, how is it possible that this idea that seems like such a perfect thing for VR, you're actually communicating a super important gameplay element through the actual geometry around you? How is it not catching?
Yeah.
And the moment we put a bar instead of it, it just, everyone understood it immediately. And so for us, I think it was a very important lesson about innovate where you want to innovate.
Yeah.
In things that are supposed to be straightforward and are not like the crux of your game, just hand it over as simple as possible.
Interesting.
And also, there's always this gap between how you understand what you're doing and what people who never saw it understand it.
Yeah.
And this was kind of a blatant example of it for us. That was just like, all right, we really need to examine every assumption that we have about affordance, about communication.
Yeah, it was very sobering.
Yeah.
And maybe that will change down the line. I don't know. Maybe with headsets providing a better field of view, where you can.
It's not just that. I think also there's a certain amount of new information that you can process at a time. And when you are in VR in early days, playing a game you've never played before with rules that you're just figuring out and a mechanic that uses your body, and there's a lot of mental load. And when you're trying to continue adding like mechanics that the floor idea could have worked really well if every other element in the game was already well known to the player. But there's a limit to how much change and how much innovation you can ask a person to accommodate.
Yes, I feel like it's a bit of a problem where you're innovating kind of ahead of the market, because putting on the health bar is pretty much taking an aspect from the pancake games that you mentioned, right?
Sure.
It's what people are used to. And I think the interesting thing there, for the Oculus Quest especially, you're hitting a lot of gamers that aren't really into gaming in general. There's a lot of people who are first-time VR users, and that's the only experience with the games they've ever had. So I feel like with me or with people who are hardcore onto side quests, we probably would have understood that gameplay tactic. But when you're catering to a larger audience, I guess you have to make sacrifices, right, or make changes.
Yeah, but it's also just a matter of good practice. Focus your innovation in the places that matter to you, because if you innovate in too many places, you take the attention away from the places that matter to you. That's very just like in terms of game design. I think that's an important kind of principle.
Nice. So let's get into the interesting reviews now. Let's go straight into the 1 stars. All right. So I confess I've read this beforehand. It's not too bad. I chose it for a reason. So Card Taker 1984 says
this should actually he updated this to 5 stars.
5 stars.
Oh, did he?
He's one of our top players, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Us for a while because we weren't updating the game in a high enough visible rate to his satisfaction.
I see.
But
he's an active member on our Discord server, and
Because that's the reason I chose this, because it's 1 star, but his review is not that bad. Like his review talks about how it became more enjoyable with the multiplayer mode. So that was my main question.
No, I mean, just to point out, like this review and this 1 star here actually comes out of love for the game.
Nice.
Because he seriously, he has, I don't know, hundreds of hours probably or more. And he was just being frustrated that it felt to him like a game that he really loved wasn't getting enough attention from its developers.
Fair enough.
And then we presented our brand new roadmap for the game for the next year. So he decided to update his
beautiful. Well, hopefully Oculus updates this soon. Right. Let's go on to the next one. This is from Local Ghost 001. You guys gave a response. I'll just hide your response first. So this guy says it has poor physics. For a game based on reactionary physics, it's a struggle to do anything in a realistic fashion. Unless you smash every ball, expect frustration. So I was really quite puzzled with a review like this because A, it's a video game, but B, if you did realistic physics, the ball would probably go like 10 to 20 feet ahead of the player every time and not do anything interesting. So what's your response to this review?
I don't want to say something that ends up being very different from what we actually wrote him in response. Look, man, I mean, obviously, it's a valid opinion. I would wager that he hasn't given it enough time or that he tried it in an off moment because on the one hand, it's true that the physics are not realistic. On the other hand, they are very consistent and very predictable. So I think 10, 20, 30 minutes into the game, everyone starts getting a hang of it. We've seen dozens of people try it, including our parents. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Our goal from the very beginning was to create games for VR that simply couldn't be experienced out of this medium.
Yes.
I mean, we simply didn't want to try to imitate real world physics. We wanted to create something new, to imagine how it would be if we would have a virtual world.
Yes. I see.
What did we answer? I'm curious.
You want to see? It was very friendly because, of course, got to keep up public opinion. That was good. One thing I didn't understand about his issue was the game struggles with having 2 controllers in the same space. Why would anyone ever want to use 2 controllers at the same time if they wanted to switch hands? Is that the thinking there?
Yes, some of our top players actually used to play that way.
Yeah.
Ah, I see. Cool.
They're switching hand almost every other shot.
Really?
Yeah.
Like I get
so much. There was a period of like a year.
Players.
I guess I'm still a noob at the game, so I don't know about this.
You're playing it right.
Cool. Well, that was very interesting about Racket NX. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about how I found you guys actually, which is not through Racket NX. I found you through a beta release, I guess, on the side quest called Ghosts in the Machine. Before I talk about it, could you tell our viewers here a little bit about what that is and just introduce the concept?
Ghost in the Machine is a very short kind of experiment we made in what a graphic novel could be, what it could look like in VR. The actual intention for it was to create a medium for us to convey content in terms of like story and world building, etc., for a game we were working on at the time. So it was kind of like the idea was that the whole game would be in 3D and full-fledged graphics, but in order to push the story and narrative that we really wanted to push, and we talked about this a little bit in the emails, we really wanted more content. For a small studio like us, we needed to find a more efficient solution than AAA content. So we had this idea, and we tried it out very, very preliminarily, and then we decided to try for something a little more complicated. We made Ghost in the Machine.
Yeah, cool. They simply just closed himself within this specific room for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And just made it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what the experience is on side quests, I would describe it as a visual novel or a graphic novel in VR. But is it the case where this is just a concept for the storytelling mechanic in a larger game that you're building?
So, are you by any chance on our newsletter?
Yes, yes, that's where I read that. Yeah.
All right, yeah. Ghost in the Machine was exactly that. I mean, it was made in the context of a specific game, a game world that we were already building. We're actually halfway through. We didn't exactly know the story by then, and a lot of the concepts in Ghost in the Machine were actually invented during the creation of Ghost in the Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was actually a very long evolution of this medium afterwards.
I see.
At some point, as we described in the newsletter, and anyone who's interested in whatever we're talking about here is really invited to go to onehamsa.com and register to our newsletter. Sorry for the...
no worries. I can bring it up here.
Thank you. As things evolved, we actually ended up deciding to make a game based solely on that medium with the same story, same world that we developed by then. And the idea was to have this kind of adventure comic game where it's kind of a little bit like a choose your own adventure within this medium of Ghost in the Machine.
Sure. So
which is,
before you go on there, Dave, let's actually bring it up on YouTube here and just show our viewers what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was just about to describe it, but this is better.
Unfortunately, this is the best video I saw so far, just because, you know, it's on SideQuest, so there aren't a lot of content creators that uploaded anything to YouTube yet, but let's take a look here.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
Cool. So there wasn't actually any dialogue from the creator here. It's quite a small channel with about 6K views, but that was a cool trailer for what Ghost in the Machine is. Again, I want to tell people that what you're seeing on screen, you know, is just still images with a moving camera, but in VR, a virtual visual novel is quite an interesting thing. And, you know, this lasts maybe 2 to 3 minutes, probably this short gameplay of it, and that was enough to make me contact you guys. So that's how interesting this thing is. Now that the viewers have context of what this is and how cool it is, what's the direction you're taking for it now? So you said you're going to build an entire game in this kind of graphic novel fashion?
Word.
I see.
Yeah, could you full screen? We can't quite see you.
Oh, 1 second. Let me stop sharing here. Here we go.
There we go. Yeah, so it's a long story. I won't go into all of it, but essentially at some point about a year plus ago, we decided that we'd try making a full-fledged kind of adventure game in this medium. Right? So again, you can imagine what you just saw, only it has like a long and branching narrative where you can take different decisions at different points, and it kind of takes it evolves in the way that you push it. There are people you can talk to, there's things you can pick up and put there, etc., etc. And the game world was developing quite nicely. It was in a pretty full and interesting place. We put together an amazing team. We teamed up with Canadian science fiction author Peter Watts, who was one of our favorite authors and people. And he was doing the writing, and we had Ben Lucas Boysen, also known as Heck, who is a brilliant electronic musician who is doing the music. And we had Mickey Montlo, who is a world-renowned comic illustrator, doing the art. And everything was set, and we were kind of working on that, I guess, since September last year, about a year ago. And for various reasons that I discussed in the newsletter, and we'll continue discussing actually in the next newsletter more in depth, it didn't work out. We ended up having to cancel the game after about 6 months of pre-production of hard work. It was quite painful, and quite humbling, and quite teaching. And the silver lining, besides all the things that we learned, which are always so important in game design, is that we've established so much of how this thing would work that we've resolved to absolutely still use it in its original purpose, which is on the game we're working on now, still have this medium, convey all the cutscenes and all the extra kind of content. And I won't go into too much detail there. It's still a secret. But yeah, so we're definitely still going to be using this medium.
Cool. It is still coming.
Cool. Yeah, one of the reasons we put it on SideQuest though is that I think it's not a very complicated concept, and it's not very complicated to make. It's basically the age-old idea of 2.5D, which is you have 2D images on 3D planes that we had for motion graphics and stuff like that, just in VR. And so we wanted to put it out there also so that maybe someone who might actually do something with that idea picks up on it.
Cool.
There's still a lot of potential even to do just a simple comic in that medium.
Yes.
And I would love to see that, but we're a gaming studio, and the game aspects didn't work for us so much. So.
I see. So most of HackerNoon's reader base are actually software developers, some even indie game developers like yourselves. From that process, where you had to let go of that game you guys have been working on for so long, is there any key points that you learned that could save some of our readers headaches in the future? Anything that you want to pass on to them?
Yeah, so there are several lessons that I would say are quite specific and maybe not that transferable.
Okay.
But, perhaps the most relevant point here is look for ground truth as soon as possible and as frequently as possible. One of the biggest problems we had here is that we had a good idea, we had a good proof of concept, but the next time we actually touched base with an actual playable build was too long later, and some assumptions that ended up not being correct were revealed too late in the process.
I see.
And so this is a lesson that for us, I know so for some people it's kind of built in, but for us, we're idea guys. We find ourselves very much in headspace, and if you go too far in headspace without having a reality check, especially in game design, then you're doomed to discover that you're wrong.
I see.
Cool. Yeah, so it's actually, there is a concept called fail faster in game design, and that's exactly it.
I see.
Try, prototype, be with your finger on the pulse all the time.
I see. So just to clear things up, the game you're currently working on, is it still called Challenger, or is it a different, or is it secret?
The repo, the Git repo is still...
No, actually we moved it to GitLab.
Okay.
And I insisted we change the name.
Okay, so a resounding no.
Okay. Is there anything you can reveal to our viewers about so far, like what the genre is, what the gameplay might be like, what the story might be like?
All right. I can say.
Be careful.
You
Be careful.
I can say that it takes place in a different part of the same world that Ghost in the Machine is in.
Okay.
Very different place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that means it's still kind of this weird modern take on cyberpunk.
Okay.
I can say that it is an action game. It is about fighting, and it is about violence.
Okay.
and I think that's all I can say at this point.
Interesting.
We're really hoping that we can announce it in the coming couple of months, but that also depends on business relationship we end up forming around it. So
I see.
It's not.
I see it. Any projected release date? Maybe 2021, 2022, 2023?
What I can say right now is that we have been prototyping for what, like 18 months?
18 months.
To
Wow.
reach, even more than that, to reach a point where we could say, all right, there is something there, and we can start building on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm personally very, very happy with where things are at right now. But I would say nothing about
Cool.
release date.
No worries. No worries. Well,
quite too early, but yeah, we hope to have something to show pretty soon.
beautiful. Well, our viewers can sign up for your newsletter then if they want to get updates on that. So
that was place to do that.
let's move on now to VR in general, because one thing that we talked about over email, Dave, was we both agree that one of the biggest issues right now in the industry is the lack of narrative in the games. And the lack of narrative for me is what makes something feel like a game and less like a tech demo. Before we get into that, in terms of narrative, gameplay, design, everything, what are the best experiences you two have had in VR so far? Doesn't have to be Quest. It can be any VR you've played, anything.
I'm not sure I had a good narrative experience in VR. Like a game that was...
Maybe Half-Life Alyx was...
Okay, sure. It still felt to me like it wasn't doing anything new. All right, so let's talk about Half-Life Alyx for this example.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely the most traditional game narrative that we've seen in VR. Definitely the most of a story that we've seen in VR. Still, I would argue doing nothing unique to VR in terms of story.
I would agree.
But that isn't to sell it short or anything like that. I don't think that you necessarily have to do something that is unique to VR in terms of story, but I would say that's actually the only example that I've played of something that had a semblance of a story.
That actually got me immersed in a level that I was in the game.
When you say a narrative unique to VR, do you mean that the narrative you see so far are narratives that would work on traditional console games, and you're looking more for a narrative that can only be done in VR?
No, on the contrary. I think that I haven't seen yet a narrative in a game that wouldn't work on PC. And the only place that I actually have seen a narrative in VR that was decent and that had some significance in the gameplay was with Half-Life Alyx. And again, that was a pretty traditional kind of narrative.
Yeah.
Yes.
Both in terms of the narrative itself, but also in terms of how it was conveyed.
I see. Just to throw a few more titles out there, one of the big ones still for PC VR, console PSVR is Skyrim VR. What's your take on these huge ports of these big AAA games to VR? What do you think? How are those performing in terms of bringing narrative to the VR industry?
They're exactly as you said it. They are ports. I mean, these are not like VR organic experience.
I see.
I mean, what I'm missing is content that I can only get in VR, and that only makes sense in VR, that actually involves me emotionally.
I see.
I mean, all of my senses are captured. I'm yours. Do something interesting.
Yes.
That's what I'm missing.
Interesting.
Again, there's a lot of interesting mechanics out there and some good games as well, but just like, take me somewhere interesting.
Let's dive. I'm going off book here, but let's dive a bit into the mechanics. There is different things you can do with the player emotionally in VR that I think a lot of people don't know about. Like the sense of objects that are flying past peripherals. A sense of depth, and there is one really interesting app on SideQuest called Liminal. Have you seen that yet?
No, I'll open it now.
Yeah, Liminal. It's very interesting. It seems more like a psychology experiment rather than a game. So you can go in there.
I saw the other day.
Seen something about this.
Yeah. So basically, they're just really weird, crazy experience you can go in that are supposed to evoke certain emotions like happiness, peace. If you're having a rough day, you can go into this one. It'll make you feel calm. And I think I've definitely had a few of these experiences in VR, just maybe by accident. Are you guys looking into what kind of mechanics are you looking into in terms of, VR mechanics that we can't do anywhere else? What are things that are kind of at the front of the industry that not a lot of us know about yet?
So I think the forefront of the industry, and perhaps it will remain the forefront, even though it is quite obvious, is the physical aspect. And I feel that the physical aspect, first of all, is the most interesting and relevant, not only because it keeps you fit and moving, but because it engages all of your senses, it engages all of your nervous system, it engages your spatial awareness, your coordination. It is so healthy for you to do things with your body. I mean, we do so little of that. And also in terms of just, we're built to use this thing. We have so many intuitions in our body that aren't used in gaming, haven't been used until now. So I think this is the main frontier, and will probably remain the main frontier in VR for a while. And what we're interested in is pushing that.
I see.
Some of the pillars that we've established for ourselves with the game that we're working on now is that it has to be visceral. You have to, the action has to be like something that your body does automatically. Something that feels intuitive, but in the context of a gameplay, you can learn how to hone it and, improve your skill level, etc. But it's something that your body wants to do.
Yeah, I see.
And that's for us, the major, mechanical,
I
line
see.
of thinking.
So you're pushing towards, gameplay mechanics that are reactions rather than press A to jump sort of thing. That's
Absolutely.
what you're doing?
If you can do it with a button, do it with a button. One of the most frustrating things in VR is that there's something you can do with a binary button, but you have to move your hand for it. It never feels satisfying. It's like, why am I doing this? So you're right. It's not just a matter of the mechanics. It's also what you do with them.
I see.
And if I'm, for example, if I have a sword in my hand, right, and I cut down an enemy, and it doesn't matter if I hit like this or like this or like this or like that, then I want a button.
I see. Very interesting. So this is a bit of a more out there question, but if the true goal of VR, the true end goal is a deep dive, Neuralink, I feel like I'm in there, my sense of touch is activated, my sense of smell is activated. If that is the true end goal, and let's say the starting line for this journey was, the Nintendo Virtual Boy, in your perspective as a developer, how close are we towards that goal? Are we 50% there? Are we 10% there? Not even close? What do you guys think?
I think the goal changes faster than the technology does. And by the time we reach this goal, it will already have shifted into something else. I think a much more solid and foreseeable goal is actual persistent AR, where people actually have digital layers of information embedded and persistently embedded into the physical world. From that, I would say we are still about 10 years away, I would guess, to have something like that that is widespread.
Maybe 7.
Yeah, in terms of Neuralink and in terms of just basically neurological intervention, read, write. If it's we've been reading this stuff for a long time. I've had friends who were deep into neurobiology. It was one of my favorite topics for a long time. These things take a very long time.
Yeah.
The best we can do now is kind of stimulate whole bunches of neurons to fire in sync more or less, and kind of read backward kind of convoluted information to kind of infer what's happening in some regions of the brain. We're still quite far from that.
I see.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll happen in our lifetime, or I shouldn't hold my breath?
How long do you plan on living?
At least another 40, 50 years, I hope.
Yeah, I think we're going to have some cool stuff happening in our brains in 40 years for sure.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
I'm counting on it, actually.
So that brings me to my next question in terms of immersiveness in VR. Let me just grab something from my closet real quickly here.
Props.
Yeah.
What's your take, guys, on haptic accessories in VR? So this is a really bulky haptic vest from a company called Baptix. They're a great company. Their development is good. This is a really solid piece of equipment, but there's a lot of mixed feelings about it. What do you guys think about haptics and their potential to create the immersion in VR that we're looking for?
Yeah, it's a natural next step, no doubt about it. But it's still so rare to find a player using it. That it won't be cost efficient to develop for it currently.
I actually disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things that happened with smartphones is that our expectation of frictionless experiences and zero effort engagement or zero effort onboarding has really just, the bar has been raised in these respects. And even putting on a headset and clearing the room can often feel like, it takes you 23 seconds and it still feels like a step that you need a certain amount of, of motivation to actually do.
Yeah.
And with all of the accessories that I've seen for VR, it's too much. And like putting on a vest in order to play, people don't actually do it. I hardly put on my headphones when I play Overwatch.
Yeah.
And seriously, and I think that for arcades, stuff like that, where you're already engaged in the experience, that's one thing. But for home use, I honestly don't see it catching on.
I see. Yeah, to give Baptix credit, it's quite decent. When the game has native support for it in the Quest, it's really easy. You put the thing on, you press one button, tap one setting, and you're going. But I think the biggest issue for everyone there is developers like yourself need to have a certain return to actually program for it, right? And the equipment themselves cost sometimes more than the Quest in general. So it's a long way before that gets mainstream, I think.
As a developer, you see the amount that Facebook, for instance, are pouring into simply making people put the headset on, using the Oculus mobile app to push notifications and do everything within their power to simply make you put the headset on.
Yeah, that first step causes so much friction. Once you're in. But that first step of just putting the headset on, I mean, it's such a barrier. So that's a big problem for these kinds of people.
Who is it a barrier to? Because for someone like me, that's like a 1 second thing. I can put the headset on, I'll be in there in a second. But who is this a struggle for?
Someone like me. I find myself, I'll just give my own example. Like if I'm sitting at home and I feel like playing something, and I'm sitting and I'm probably next to the computer, hitting up like the launcher seems so much easier than standing up, moving the table and putting the thing on.
Yeah,
I see.
The amount of initial commitment, right? Think about it this way. You have a certain amount of commitment to the process that on PC is quite linear, right? Every time you do a click, like, all right, I'll do it, a little bit of commitment. All right, I double click, a little bit more. Oh, all right, it's opening up, a little bit more. So you have this kind of linear line where with every little motion that you do, you're slightly more committed.
I see.
To playing the game. With a Quest, you have your initial commitment is like halfway through the commitment line of the PC. Yeah. Like the actions that you need to, so it's hard to jumpstart that.
Yeah, because you're not in there to begin with.
Yeah.
You're in front of your PC most of the day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I get it.
And again, for a lot of VR enthusiasts, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
I would not consider myself a VR enthusiast, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Like I'm not one of those people who spend hours in VR. I mean, I do, but it's because I'm developing.
Yeah.
But I don't. Yeah, when I go back home, I spend a lot more time gaming on PC than on VR.
Yeah, we're all PC gamers.
Oh, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And it's not that I don't enjoy games on VR. It's just that either I come home and I'm a little tired and I don't feel like standing up and moving around too much, or it's just like a commitment thing.
I see. I see.
Yeah. The only thing I have to say about that is that, let's say that for the past couple of months, once our brand new prototype reached the point where is it? Playable, at least internally inside the studio, was the first time where I felt like I have to take my Quest with me each and every day back home. So I had the opportunity to play it, but it was honestly the first time it happened.
I see. I see.
And I think one of I'll just one more point about that. You know, connecting it back to our previous point.
Yeah.
One of the issues for me is that most of the games that I play in VR are not captivating enough, are not games that I feel like going back into. There have been very few games that I felt like, all right, I want to go back. I want to make my score better. I want to see what happens. I want to, I feel it just doesn't happen that much. And that's kind of a testament to how much we're in a tech demo place as opposed to how much we're in a gameplay place.
Yeah. We're like hardcore gamers.
Yeah.
We play genres such as, I don't know, hardcore RPGs, strategy, tactical games. So it has to have this level of sophistication to
captivate.
I see. Before we go on, guys, do you have a lot of time? I know we schedule an hour, but is it okay if we keep going, or do you have another meeting in a few minutes? Or
our food is still being defrosted, I think. So
okay, perfect. Good, because that brings me to my next question then. So in your opinion, what changes or advancements would you like to see in the VR industry in the next 5 years? Or what advancements that do you think have to happen in the next 5 years for this thing to take off and become more mainstream?
Hardware or software?
Both. Anything.
So, form factor to begin with. We have to have a much more balanced headsets that we can just strap on and use for much larger amounts of time.
What? Yeah.
No, seriously, I think.
It's important. It's important. I think that eye tracking is like super important on the as a hardware aspect.
One of the things that eye tracking enables is for you to have high resolution rendering only where you're looking.
Yeah.
And that really opens up a lot of like performance improvements for these devices.
Yeah. Having the headset act like maybe more like a human eye can help with fatigue and issues such as this, which are still very very present at the time. At the current point.
So in order for that to happen, they would need to create a headset that has cameras above each of the eye and is tracking the eye.
There's several ways to do it. Often it's several cameras, usually IR. And
I think that the mechanical front is also quite challenging to have something that is very consistent and very accurate all the time.
Yeah, I would say hand tracking is a big thing. You can walk around with a pair of glasses that you put on as opposed to having to have like controllers and stuff. I think Oculus are working on it. The current version is kind of good in terms of software, not so good in terms of hardware. Probably will be better in the next iteration. And for me, it's we need better content. We need things that appeal to a not necessarily technically inclined population. People who are like, you know, just a wider variety of people, who are more used to lower friction content, you know, higher quality content, more story, more narrative.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with our new game. Try to call all of the hardcore PC and console games. Come on, guys.
Yeah, the thing that we're trying to make, and that is also a testament to the thing that we think is missing, or that we'd like to see more of, is a game where the mechanics are purely VR, but in terms of the complexity of the game, the story, the game loops, it wouldn't shame a console game.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's actually a perfect segue to my next question. It feels like this is scripted, but I promise it isn't. So when do you think, one of the things that was great about your story is you were surprised by the amount of sales that Racket NX got on the Oculus Quest. And I think one thing you can attribute that to is VR is becoming more mainstream, especially with the Quest, because it's become a lot more affordable. When do you think that the number of VR gamers will match the number of console gamers in the world? And when do you think the number of VR gamers will surpass the number of console gamers in the world? Because like I said before, there are a lot of people who VR was their first console. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's interesting, because if you look at the mobile sector, it took like, I think, between 5 to 7 years to catch up. And then to suppress, but to surpass. Sorry, but then again, mobile devices is something that all of us are using by default. So yeah, there is a difference. But then again, I don't know, maybe between 10 to 15 years.
I see.
Like I imagine that I don't know when one will surpass when VR will surpass consoles. I think there will always be room for consoles. It's much more social. It's much more easy to start up, etc. But yeah, I don't think any of these big things are happening in the next 5 years. I think 5 years from now is when it's going to start like hitting off. I think we're still missing some technologies, some form factors, content. Yeah.
I see.
Cool. And then for the long run.
For sure, and I'm glad to be on this journey with you guys. Can't wait for that game. One of the big recent news in VR was Oculus's decision to require a Facebook account for Oculus Quest. Just the general takeaways from that. Right now it's okay, but they did say in 2 or 3 years, I believe, they will stop supporting Oculus accounts, so everyone will need a Facebook account. What do you guys think about that? What do you think it'll do to the industry? Do you think it'll put people off, or what's your opinion there?
It will definitely put people off. For me personally, the more egregious issue here is that they promised explicitly that they wouldn't do it. This was after Facebook already bought Oculus. They said, you are never going to, in a statement, you're never going to have a Facebook account. That's the biggest problem for me. Look, we have a problem with big tech and data. It's not secluded to VR. It doesn't matter who would own Oculus. This would be a problem whenever it became mainstream enough. And even though, I'm not sure if I should say this, but I dislike Facebook as much as the other person, I think it's really unfair, to disregard the simple fact that without Facebook, VR would not be where it is today. And actually, the only chance for VR to become something real in the next years is on Facebook's shoulders, right? So there's a kind of dichotomy here that we have to acknowledge both sides of, I feel. And again, the thing with the going back on their statement is my biggest problem. The actual problem with Facebook taking your data away and having more data when it comes to VR, that's a general problem. It has nothing to do with Oculus. As we give more and more data away anyway. That's not the issue as far as I'm concerned.
Sorry, could you repeat what you said earlier? Because the mic just cut out. You said that the only way where we can get anywhere with VR is if it's on Facebook's terms, did you say?
No.
No.
No, not at all. But I did say that right now, the only company that's actually carrying the VR torch is Facebook.
Yes.
And as a developer, I can tell you that what they are doing in terms of like the backend, the support for developers, the store curation, just like the marketing is just it's top tier. No other company except for someone the size of Facebook would be able to push it the way that they are. And even though I really don't want to have a Facebook account hooked up to my Oculus account, I would rather do that than have Facebook drop Oculus. Not that that's an option, but I would rather do that.
For sure.
So that has to be stated, I feel.
Yeah, it definitely sounds fair. There's definitely takeaways at every aspect, Yeah, for sure. So
surprisingly.
Yeah. To end off here, in a 2017 article, the CEO of RocketWorks was quoted saying, "There is no money in VR game development." This was back in 2017. Do you think this is still true in 2020? And if not, why?
In a word, as Dave stated before, the Oculus Quest was rather pivotal in terms of the business aspects of things. 2017 was a tough year, I can tell you that. As a studio director,
we almost closed in 2017.
In 2017,
Really?
Yeah, and there were many other studios that did close during 2017, 2018. But then Oculus came along with the Quest, and I believe changed things again in a pivotal way. And my hopes are simply to see one of the other big five jumps into the water, maybe by the end of Q1 2021, and change everything again. I mean, competition is exactly what we need right now.
Exactly.
And like another huge entity that can pull this off.
Definitely agree with you guys there. Well, thank you very much for your time today. That's all the questions I had. We got through everything with a decent time. Is there any last words you'd like to say to our viewers, our readers, or the other game developers that might be watching this? Any last parting advice?
Whenever someone asks me for last words, I am tempted to say I regret nothing. You're just gonna take the fifth here.
Well, cool. So let's end there with where can our viewers catch you at? You guys have Facebook, Instagram, or is it mostly your newsletter that you put out information?
We post on Twitter.
Yeah.
And we have our newsletter, which is probably where we have the most interesting information as well. We're giving out a lot of like extra materials there, and that's probably and we don't spam either. Yes. So that's probably the best way to stay in touch.
Yeah. Well, if you do spam, I would take VR spam any day. It's not spam for me. But for our readers there, that's onehamsa.com. So spell it out, ONEHAMSA.com. All right. Thank you very much, Dave and Assaf.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.